Have you ever felt a chill run down your spine, not because of the cold, but because of something unnatural? Let me take you back to my first year in college, a time when the world still seemed simple, and my biggest goal was to earn some extra cash at a newly opened tea shop. But it turned out that the simplicity of my life was about to be shattered by an encounter that would forever stay in the dark corners of my memory. It was the summer of my freshman year when I landed a part-time job at a small bubble tea shop that had just opened in town. It wasn't a big place. Barely 2 meters across, really. Just big enough for a small counter, a cramped storage room, and a couple of tiny restrooms. The shop wasn't aiming to have a dine-in experience. Most of our customers just came by for a quick takeaway. But on that particular day, business was slow, the kind of slow that makes minutes feel like hours. I was working the afternoon shift with my coworker, Tan. Tan was 2 years older than me and was known for being a little sensitive. Sensitive to things most of us never see. He would talk about how he could feel cold spots or see shadows flickering when no one else did. I didn't think much of it at the time. Honestly, I thought it was just Tan's way of adding a bit of drama to his otherwise monotonous workdays. That day, something strange happened. It was around 3 p.m., and only one customer was sitting on the bench, waiting for her drink. A young woman, scrolling through her phone absent-mindedly. Tan was preparing her order when suddenly, his face went pale. His eyes widened, staring at the narrow corridor leading to the restrooms. I followed his gaze but saw nothing unusual. Then bang! The cup of tea he had been holding slipped from his hands and hit the floor, splashing tea everywhere. Tan looked shaken. He kept glancing nervously towards the women's restroom. The customer, clearly startled, asked, "Hey, are you okay? What did you see?" Tan hesitated for a second, then blurted out, "I saw someone, a woman, in a long old-fashioned dress. She walked right into the women's restroom, but she had no feet." The woman waiting for her tea exchanged an uneasy glance with me. I tried to laugh it off, even though my stomach was beginning to twist. I glanced at the restroom door. The light spilling from under it cast a shadow, but there were no footsteps, no sounds of anyone inside. After that day, things got weirder. Every day, the women's restroom seemed to have this unnatural gloominess to it. Its light bulb, the only yellow one in the shop, was always dim, casting eerie shadows that made anyone inside look ghostly. Tan refused to go near the restroom, and even the rest of us started to avoid it unless we had no choice. One late evening, our boss came in holding an incense burner and a small meal box. He said something that sent shivers down our spines. "This is for her. She's not harmful, but she doesn't like to be ignored." From that day onward, we began to leave offerings for the lady in the restroom. A bit of rice, some incense, anything to keep her at peace. The worst moment for me came one night when I was closing alone. I had just finished preparing the offerings, lighting incense, leaving a small bowl of rice near the door, when I suddenly felt a cold breeze sweep across my neck. The lights flickered, and a chill went down my spine. The room seemed to close in around me. In that moment of silence, I could have sworn I heard a soft sigh. Needless to say, I handed in my resignation the very next morning. Even now, whenever I pass by that street, the memory comes back in flashes. The dim light of that restroom, Tan's pale face, and that dreadful silent sigh. I wonder if she's still there, haunting the small bubble tea shop, waiting for someone else to notice her. So, next time you enter a small, quiet shop and feel the air go still, just think. Maybe it's not just your imagination. Over the next few days, the strange occurrences at the shop began to intensify. The women's restroom became a hotspot for unsettling incidents, and soon, it wasn't just Tan who noticed. I remember one afternoon when I was covering a shift for a coworker. I was alone behind the counter, waiting for the next customer, when I heard it, a faint, melodic humming coming from the direction of the restrooms. The melody was soft and eerie, almost like a lullaby. I tried to dismiss it, thinking maybe it was someone outside the shop, but the humming grew louder, as if whoever was singing was getting closer. I felt my heart begin to race. With every step I took toward the restroom, the humming grew fainter, almost like it was retreating, leading me forward. When I finally reached the door, the humming abruptly stopped. The silence that followed was suffocating. I hesitated for a moment, then slowly pushed open the door to the women's restroom. The room was empty, but the mirror, the large, full-length mirror, had fogged up, and there, scrawled in the condensation, were the words, "Don't ignore me." I stumbled back, my pulse pounding in my ears. The door slammed shut on its own, and the light flickered above me. My hands shook as I fumbled with the doorknob, finally wrenching it open and stumbling back into the main area of the shop. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It felt as though there were eyes on me, cold and unblinking, from every dark corner of the shop. The strange occurrences didn't stop there. Customers began to complain about feeling uneasy when they used the restrooms. One woman claimed that while she was washing her hands, she saw a figure standing behind her in the mirror, but when she turned around, there was no one there. Another customer, a young girl, came out crying, insisting that someone had whispered her name while she was inside. The whispers, they seemed to come from nowhere, yet from everywhere at the same time. Tan and I grew more and more terrified. One evening, we decided to confront our boss about the ghost. He seemed to know more than he let on, and we needed answers. When we asked him, he sighed, his eyes clouding over with an emotion that looked like a mixture of fear and resignation. "This place has a history," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The woman you're seeing, she's real. She used to live in this building long before it was a shop. She was pregnant. Her husband left her, and she ended it all in that restroom." He paused, looking toward the hallway as if he could see her standing there even now. "I was warned not to disturb her. That's why I tell you to leave offerings. She's not malicious, but she's lonely, and she wants to be acknowledged." After that conversation, Tan and I became almost obsessive about the offerings. We never skipped a day, fearing the consequences if we did. But even then, the occurrences didn't stop. The air in the shop seemed heavy, thick with something unseen. It was always cold, no matter how warm it was outside. Customers came in less frequently, and those who did often left quickly, their faces pale and uneasy. One night, after an especially long shift, I was closing up alone again. It had become routine for me to light the incense and leave the offering, and I tried to do it as quickly as possible so I could leave. But that night felt different. As soon as I lit the incense, the flame flickered wildly before going out entirely. The shop plunged into darkness, and the cold seemed to seep into my bones. Suddenly, I heard the soft sound of footsteps behind me. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, and they were coming closer. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, each beat echoing in my ears. I turned around, and there, in the dim light from the street lamp outside, I saw her. She was standing at the end of the hallway, her long hair hanging in front of her face, her dress tattered and stained. Her feet hovered just above the ground, her head slowly tilting as if she was looking at me, even though I couldn't see her eyes. I felt my legs go weak, and before I could react, she started gliding towards me, her movements smooth and unnatural. I stumbled backward, knocking over a stack of cups as I tried to get away. The noise seemed to startle her, and she stopped, her head tilting to the side in an almost curious manner. Then, just as suddenly as she had appeared, she vanished. The air in the room seemed to release, and I could breathe again, but the fear lingered, heavy and suffocating. I didn't sleep that night. The image of her face, her head tilting as if to study me, was burned into my mind. I knew then that this wasn't just some harmless spirit. She was lonely, yes, but there was something darker to her presence, something that craved more than just acknowledgement. Over the following weeks, I began to notice changes in myself.